Hi everyone, this is Captain B-Rye once more. Uh, I spent the last maybe 2.5 days in refactoring hell, primarily because I just totally got my domain. I modeled my domain objects pretty badly. Uh, when I first sat down to build this game, I kind of typed up on Notepad what I thought the F# program structure would look like. And I came up with the idea that the domain objects, such as the entity, the screen, the groups, the game, etc., would be built of basically a common, for entities, be built of a common entity object, and then as each particular domain object specialized, it would have a discriminated union that describes its more specialized capabilities, such as either it has a discriminated, the entity contains a discriminated union which would have either an actor or a GUI. And then further down, if you have the GUI, it itself would contain a discriminated union that would have, either a text box, button, toggle, label, whatever. That worked out very poorly. I've been thinking for the past, I guess, week or so about changing this, but I couldn't see how modeling it in a different way would really give me much advantage. However, I was having so many little issues with the way I was modeling it, I decided, well, probably at this point it's worth just trying to change the way I model it, just to see how different things will end up in practice, to see if I would get substantial improvement. So what I ended up doing is I changed the model objects to be from being a record with recursively contained discriminated unions to just being a discriminated union with the common fields that contains records with common fields, which is also kind of recursive. What is recursive? So I went ahead and made those changes. It took me about 16 man hours to make all those changes. There were some deep changes. I had to rewrite a lot of the property grid translation code. I had to rewrite the serialization code almost entirely. But I got an additional benefit from that. And so I did all that rewriting, and it turns out the modeling domain objects with discriminated unions at the top rather than records that contain discriminated unions for specialized fields is a huge improvement. So it allowed me to remove a lot of code duplication and just to make code a lot simpler. So when you're modeling your domain objects in a functional language like F#, go ahead and go for the discriminated unions. Now, of course, I already knew this. Somehow I already knew this. I've been writing F# for about 2 years. I already knew this, but for some reason I just thought that records that contain discriminated unions recursively would somehow be a better fit. That might have been because I had the old object-oriented model in mind. For some reason I was thinking, well, the record would be kind of like the base class, and then the contained discriminated union would be kind of like a specialization on that. I was basically thinking in C, where you have structs that contain structs, where each struct was, or maybe a struct that contains unions, which contains a union. And then you would just kind of like do a switch case depending on what type of union it was, stuff like that, just old procedural thinking. Somehow invaded my thought process, and I'm not typically the type of guy to think in very to think in old terms, at least from what I know, but it bit me this time. So if you check out the code as of computer, as of revision, sorry guys, looking it up, as you can see, where's the log? as of revision ending with 2EA1, those changes have been completely implemented. Code's a lot simpler, API is a lot simpler to use. Over the next 200 days or so that I estimated this particular program, it looks like it's definitely going to pay off. I'm glad I did it. It was not fun to do it. Refactoring is not yet terribly fun in F#, primarily because we don't have refactoring tools. But refactoring is never fun for any language, in my opinion. I've just done so much of it. As an object-oriented imperative programmer, I've done so much of it in my life. It no longer has any sort of like fun to it. It's just, more of this. So, as you can see on my screen, I've got some code up, and this is the new entity file inside of the new edit logic. And this is, so remember we had bad code before. Some of that bad code was eliminated, but some new bad code did spring up. So I've got some code duplication, and maybe it's because I just haven't figured out, like I've been so concentrated on other problems, I haven't figured out how to actually address this problem, which may well be simple and straightforward. I was thinking when I wrote this duplicated code, I knew it was bad. I always know it's bad when writing duplicated code. Well, I usually do. Sometimes you miss it, but I was thinking while I was writing this code, boy, wouldn't it be nice to have F# macros. I think macros make a lot of sense in .NET languages. However, in functional languages. However, I think it almost like, I don't know if this goes back to Anders Hejlsberg's, or if it goes back to just the Microsoft language philosophy generally, but it seems to be that there's a general aversion to macros in their programming languages. And Anders' justification for that is that they're afraid by putting, for example, by putting macros in C#, I believe they're afraid that it's going to put them into a box when they try to introduce new features. And I can see how that would be the case, right? Because every time you introduce a feature, you have to look at all of the existing features and how they will potentially interact with that new feature. And once you add macros to the mix, it becomes very hard to understand that. Because macros are like the uber feature, the ultimate feature. You never know what someone's going to implement with macros. So I understand, I think, the reasoning behind it. Hopefully once C#, I guess, becomes sort of a finished language, and Microsoft's kind of done designing it, hopefully they'll just, and I anticipate they would, just go ahead and introduce macros and be like, well, okay, we don't have to worry too much about constraints any further. We're moving on to something else, and you guys just go ahead and have a heyday with macros and make your lives easier rather than relying on us because we're done developing the language. So, maybe, I don't know. But in F#, I don't think we'll get macros for a while. I guess there's a little plugin out there that has text-based macros for F#. I don't know how it works. It is, I think it's by the gentleman named Gustavo. But I haven't adopted that as a dependency yet, because I would rather have syntactic macros than textual macros. Or even something like C++ as generic programming. I mean, while I'm not a big fan of templates, you could do some nice code generation with templates in generic programming generally. That would have actually helped me out in several cases while I was writing this code. But obviously, we wouldn't want to introduce templates into F# just to get that type of genericity. That would be terrible. So, and we couldn't anyway. In practice, it would be impractical. So at any rate, I've got some abstractions that I know exist, but I don't yet have the facilities to codify them. So all that just kind of leads up to what you're about to see. Look at this awful code duplication. It is not. Oh, it is not great. That is a lot of crap. Duplication city right here. And then we got more code duplication. We got this here. This is probably worse. And this is all just duplicated. If I had macros or some better abstraction facility, or if I just figured it out, a simple way to fix it, I could get rid of all this stuff. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's a way to do it with reflection. Do some really, really tricky reflection to make all that duplication go away. But that reflection is at the point that it's so complicated to use and get right. I'm just like, I'm just gonna duplicate the code. So that's why you see this giant, enormous pile of fail. But moving beyond that, this is just the new. What we got here? Entity reflection code. You take time to read it if you want. Obviously, you only need to inspect one of the cases to see how it works. Mostly everything inside of the editor is the same. It's a bit different from last time because I did move a bunch of crap out from the program.fs into the entity.fs. You'll see that in the revision logs. So you got your entity model type descriptor. Now they're called entity models instead of just calling them vanilla entities. I now call them entity models. So instead of having an entity, you have an entity model. Instead of having a group, you have a group model. Instead of having a screen, you have a screen model, and so on. And that's because I had to turn them into discriminated unions from records. And I just wanted to add the model to the end of the name in order to help people disambiguate between whether it's the discriminated union or if it's the value representing the fields in the discriminated union. Or the fields in the record contained by the discriminated union, whatever. You got anything interesting? Now, you've seen all this stuff before. Entity model type descriptor, entity model type descriptor provider, and then here's the main where it creates the form, runs the application. I do have a couple new things inside here. Got the handles of save action, and I got some really kind of threw this stuff together here. It's not in the right place just yet, but I threw in together some save, and all it does is save I think it finds a specific entity model, and then it just saves it to a file called temp.xml. I haven't made the save and load properties real nice for the editor yet. I'm just trying to get the reflection and serialization behind it to work, and I have, so that's good. So I can move along to make these better. Obviously, every time you open, you don't want to open the same file. You want to be able to select the file. So. And then I also implemented I implemented the save. Save always saves this temp.xml, and open always opens the temp.xml. So, typical shit. Let's see here, what else have we got? Things. So, take a look at entity.fs, which is the file where I originally defined the entity. And we'll see things are somewhat similar, but somewhat different. So, for example, here a button is defined. So it used to be such that it used to be an entity could contain a GUI, which could contain a button. Now it's the case that you have a button which does contain a GUI, which does contain an entity. And this particular way of going about things is so much better. And we'll just kind of scroll on down. This is entity definition, GUI definition, button, label, text box. Very straightforward F# stuff for you. Let's go on down and look at here's the discriminated union. This is the new thing. So, I've got a button. It's kind of weird naming, but it's something you can do in F#, and it helps you save a little bit of namespace. And I had to redo all the lenses for everything too. Well, not all of the lenses, but I had to rewrite a good amount of lens implementation code for the various domain objects. And you can look at that if you want. I'm not going to bore you in this video describing how that changed. They're lenses. So that's what we have here. We got the entity lens, the getter and the setter, and it's not bad at all. There's still some duplicated code-ish. Like you see, some of these lenses are sort of duplicated code, but really, when it gets down to the level of just duplicating one or two lines of code, I'm not even sure if it's really duplication anymore. But again, with macros, I could have made a lot of this stuff disappear. This miniature duplication disappear. So I think that's about all I really wanted to go over. It's just I've been in the, like I said, I've been in the refactoring hell for quite a while, and trying to get this engine into a state where it's actually sane to use. So we can actually, one more thing we can look at. Let's see. Is now the various object definitions, domain object definitions, is a little more succinct, I suppose. So, for example, here's a text box. We just defined the text box fields, and then since now the text box contains the GUI, define the GUI's fields, and then since the GUI contains the entity, we define the entity's fields. I don't know. It seems a lot more cohesive. Isn't a big improvement, but the other improvements come in other ways. So that's good, and that's better. And just the engine overall is a lot more usable now. I think the code's clearer. There's less wonkiness. The reflection is a little more straightforward. Serialization is a little more straightforward. Some code duplication is gone, not all of it. So, all right, just want to give you guys an update. So I'm now officially back to where I was like 2 or 3 days ago in terms of functionality. But it was worth it. It was worth taking the extra time to get this stuff right. Because again, I'm going to be paying for it if I don't over the next 150, 200 days or so. Okay, that's all I got. Hopefully I can get some new features in the next video. Take care.